All right, good morning. Good morning. Sorry, good afternoon, folks. For those of you that have chosen to join us today, thank you. And thank you for taking time out of your day to be here with us as we go through the adoption of the data guidelines that we have been developing. To start off, my name is Stephen Lott. I'm the manager over the Data Analytics Division for the Office of Energy Infrastructure Safety. And today we will be presenting on the data guidelines and the changes we made, as well as taking any last comments folks would like to make. We can go to the next slide, please. All right, so this is the agenda. We kind of have an introduction, public comments, presentation of significant changes. We'll kind of after that go through the presentations again, kind of open it up for any final comments folks may have, just to give that last chance if there's any questions folks may have on those changes, and then go through the adoption process and the closing statement. Next slide, please. Yes, thank you. Meeting logistics, just as a reminder, please mute yourself when if you're not speaking. You can do verbal comments and questions. We'll take it. We don't have sessions here, but we'll take them during the appropriate period. Please raise your hand if you might have a question or comment. Comments can be written into the chat window. We will record them and evaluate them as consideration. Please, if you can, identify yourself as well so we know who we're speaking to. And as always, this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on our website shortly thereafter. Next slide, please. So because we kind of had on the agenda as public comments first, I don't want to deviate too much from that. So if there's any kind of comments folks would like to have now before we get into the changes that we've made since the last workshop we've had and the last round of comments we had before that, we can take some initial comments and then we can always come back to some other comments after we've presented the few changes we've made. So if there are any kind of opening comments folks would like to have, please raise your hand or type them in the chat.
We do have a question from an attendee asking if the
Yes.
changes can be reviewed prior to the public comments.
Yeah, well, as I said, I think we're going to kind of do some initial ones and then we can do comments again after we've gone through the changes. So, yes, let's do that.
Okay, and then we have a second question here, or a hand raised rather, from Marissa Blunchy.
Go ahead, Marissa, and could you please identify who you're from? If you're speaking, Marissa, we cannot hear you.
It was an accidental hand raise.
Oh, okay. No worries. Are there any other comments we have before going to before we review some of the changes we've made? And then again, we can take some comments after that. All right, I'm not seeing any, so let's go to the changes. And again, we will, per some person kind of suggestion and just questions from others, we can take some questions after we go through the changes. So I'll have a couple of my staff speak to these a little more in depth, but really kind of significant changes. Overall, we get a lot of, I'll just kind of back up for a second. Overall, we had a lot of comments come in. We definitely appreciate them. A lot were taken consideration. There were a lot of comments at times referring to just kind of typos or misspellings or for more clarity on some of the references. So throughout the red line document that is on our e-filing website in the docket, you can see kind of those I'll say more minor changes that we're not going to cover in here, going where we may have changed, say a this to that in a sense, or added maybe one more domain value that was suggested somewhere here, or made some of these minor changes. But to say that is to say, we got a lot of good comments coming in. That came in. We appreciated it. Mulled over a lot of them, made the changes where we felt were appropriate to include them for this round of the guidelines. And then the next slide, we can go back to the slide we were at before. These are kind of the larger changes we made to the guidelines that we felt were worth addressing here in today's adoption meeting, just because these were ones that kind of, the top one was one that I think we spoke a lot about. And then obviously the addition of 2 more tables. So first one was kind of clarifying our language regarding revisions of previously submitted data. This is in section 2.4, and I'll let Jenny Reed from my side kind of go a little more into what that means.
Thanks, Stephen. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Jenny Reed, I'm a data specialist with Energy Safety, and yeah, section 2.4, the major change to the revisions guidance is that the section's been revised to direct that revisions are now to be rolled up into submission at the next quarterly submission date, rather than submitted piecemeal as discovered. Some additional changes, there has been some detail added about what should be included in the cover letter, specifically breaking it out to some information or details that would apply only to the spatial data or only to the wildfire mitigation data tables. So that's been clarified. And then so the parts that have not been changed, still, if Energy Safety rejects an entire submitted feature or table and directs the electrical corporation to resubmit, then that's not considered a revision. So that wouldn't be a scenario that would be subject to this process. And the same is for updates to spatial asset data, because those updates are, that's the point of the data set, is expected to change. And then the also the change order process reference was updated, but substantively it's still the same, that section 2.4 does not exempt electrical corporations from the change order process. And that's about it.
All right, thank you. And then the next kind of more of a major change to the mitigation data is the inclusion of 2 more tables. This really is to capture data that is specified in the WMP technical guidelines, as in the section 6.2.1 and 6.4.2 of the technical guidelines. And these new tables are outlined in our guidelines in section 4.3.14 and 4.3.15. And I will now turn it over to Noe Rojas to go a little more into detail on that.
Hi, I'm Noe Rojas with Energy Safety. Yes, so Stephen, you kind of tapped on some of the points here already, but essentially these tables were requested by the policy division to be provided to electrical corporations so that we can facilitate the collection of data as required by those sections, specifically section 6.4.2 of the WMP technical guidelines. Table 14 essentially collects a calculated value for risk components summarized by HFTD designation. And table 15 collects a risk calculation value for each risk component, which would be a circuit, segment, or span. Again, those details are in section 6.4.2. Obviously, we have directions on how to fill out these tables in those sections there, 4.3.14 and 1.5 of the data guidelines. So you should be able to refer to those details for instructions on how to fill out those tables. And then the background will be contained in the WMP technical guidelines. You can go to the next slide. And then some other significant changes. Our tables listed here no longer look back to 2015 like the old tables did. We've shortened the span of years available for data. It's pretty self-explanatory here, which years apply to which tables. So we just wanted to shorten that up because we did get comments with regards to those timelines and the new data as well. You can go to the next slide. And then last but not least, we did receive a comment that utilities were wanting to add program names for their vegetation management inspections. So in table 2, the metric outlined here, metric number 2, time between vegetation inspection finding and resulting trimming activity. We added a program name field. That field is available to utilities to specify whatever relevant program name they might have to add to that for that metric. And that is the one section in the table where they're able to add rows. And those are the biggest changes, I would say, that we wanted to highlight here. You can go to the next slide.
All right, before we get to the adoption and close, as we stated earlier, we'll, because we would like people still, if there are any questions to have, we can address them. As I saw the question Marshall Payne had, basically, so the two new tables, yes, we're not part of original materials. They have been updated on the website as of a couple days ago and was pushed out through our e-filing notification as well of some of the changes to the table. So yes, so this was, as we stated, more of a last kind of sense, a add later, that later since we last spoke, and in a sense kind of fairly recent to this adoption meeting to have those tables included in the WMP data tables. But again, these tables are collecting information that has been specified in the WMP technical guidelines. So in that sense, what's been specified has been spelled out, but yes, the tables themselves are more relatively new since last we had the technical workshop. So again, the newer proposed final WMP wildfire mitigation data tables are reflected on our website, and again, were pushed out through our e-filing system along with a red line documentation to show those changes. One other change we did not address on here that just came to my mind that I know folks have asked before in the past. Originally, we had separated out tables 1 through 11 and table 12 by itself. That was before we had the inclusion of tables 14 and 15. All the tables now are just in one single Excel document, so it's not split out.
Thanks for pointing it out, Stephen. I forgot about that one.
Okay, and then we have a question in the chat from C. Cook. Other initiatives still includes WMP initiative category, however, it has been removed from all other initiative feature classes. We're talking about the spatial data, if I am correct on that. Okay, thank you. We will take a look.
Yeah, I can address that if you want,
okay.
Stephen.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't, essentially it's for, that is correct. That was a field that was in all of the initiative features previously. However, it's essentially redundant information for all of the other initiatives. I'm going to stop and start saying that again because I went in the wrong direction. For all of the initiative feature classes, except the quote, other initiative feature class, that's redundant information. In other words, it's the same, it's telling us the same thing that's already, because of what feature it's in. So asset inspections are a separate feature classes. Grid hardening activities are separate feature classes. Vegetation inspections and vegetation management, what category it is because of what feature it's in. The other initiative features are kind of a catch-all for any other activities that utilities may have spatial data they can use to represent and would like to include. And as such, we don't know what category. There are several possibilities of the categories that are spelled out in the WMP, but that field is not needed in the others because it doesn't give you any other information beyond what's already inherent in what feature class you're putting the data in.
Follow up to that, Brian. I see similar program name has been removed from all initiative feature classes except for vegetation inspection and asset inspection or inspection program name field still exists. So that's a follow-up question, Brian, from C Cook.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Stephen. I heard it. I'm looking because what we had a lot of,
Changes, yeah.
shouldn't say a lot. We had a significant number, a decent number of fairly small changes that we made based on feedback. And from memory, I believe that we added that field back in a couple places, but not everywhere. But I'm looking for a note on, so I don't have to say that so vaguely. Hopefully I can find a note quickly about that, because I do remember this coming up before. But the answer was roughly the same. In other words, yeah, I believe the inspection, or I shouldn't say inspection, I believe program name is redundant to what initiative feature the data are in many cases, and where it's not. And we had removed that. In our draft, I believe we had removed that field everywhere. I believe we've added it back in, and I'm sorry, I'm looking at our two different spreadsheets to track changes based on where they came from, and I'm not quickly finding my exact notes on that. But I believe that this is essentially the same case with that program name field. I think it is now included where it is relevant and provides extra information, but it is not included. Basically, the schema of all of the initiative features is not exactly the same. There are different fields based on what information is relevant.
All right. Okay, I'll say maybe this, for those who have maybe more technical questions on this spatial data, we'll do our best to answer here, but you can always also email us at data@energysafety.ca.gov as well. And we can address any technical questions when it comes to regards to the spatial data. And we have one here, Brian, if you know the answer off the top of your head, great. If not, I'd say, again, please email us this one and we can reach out to you and answer it. But for the spatial data, it was noticed that secondary line type was added to wire down. Is there expectation to report on secondary wire down? If yes, is it the same non-spatial tables too?
So as far as I understand, yes, secondary, to the extent that they're known about, secondary wires down should be reported. I think we understand that the tracking on those is likely not at the same level as primary and transmission, obviously, but yeah, to the extent that those are known about and there's data, I believe our expectation is that those will be reported.
Okay. And then I see Landy Sweet for the first question. For metrics that utilities don't currently have in table 14 and 15, can we keep it blank and comment in the cover letter for future implementation? I would say I don't have an answer on that at the moment. We can check it out. You can also reach out to Lucy Morgans on our safety policy side of the house, the group that oversees the wildfire mitigation plans, to ask for clarity on that question. And then can we clarify metric 5.h in table 10? Is this the count of risk events in table 5 that occurred in PSPS circuits, but these risk events are not PSPS outages? No, I don't know if you have an answer on top of your head.
Sorry, I was just sifting through windows here. I'd have to bring up that table and kind of look into that, Stephen.
Okay. All right. So again, I'll kind of put it out there to folks, because we do know these guidelines do get technical at times. Again, you can always also as well, we will take these down, but you can also as well email us at data.energysafety.ca.gov for follow-up to answering these technical questions. let's say, do we have any other kind of questions or comments as they pertain to kind of the data guidelines in general before we do the adoption aspect of the meeting?
We do have a
Let's
hand
see.
raised from Jonathan
Yes.
Morales and Kyle Addis.
Jonathan, please go first. Is Jonathan unmuted? Hands down. So his hands back up. Is it? Jonathan, did you have a question or was your hand just raised by accident?
Jonathan wants to know, will a domain list and new FGDB be provided, or FGDB template be provided?
Yes, all the templates will be updated and posted once we adopt all this.
Right, and then we have a question from Kyle Addis.
Please go ahead, Kyle. If you're speaking, Kyle, we cannot hear you.
Hey, Stephen, I think I
Yes.
can take that previous question and then maybe Kyle can fix the audio or type in the chat.
Sure.
So the previous question asking about table 10 versus table 5, if I'm hearing it or if I was interpreting it correctly, metric 5H under other PSPS metrics refers to number of risk events occurring on a de-energized circuit. This is under PSPS, so I think that the reference to table 5 contains wire down events and unplanned outages, whereas PSPS would not be an unplanned outage. So if the number of risk events on a de-energized circuit, if there's a wire down on a de-energized circuit, sounds like there could be some overlap there, but it's not. I don't believe that the intention here is to slice and dice those exactly the same way. It's like there are other risk events besides wire down that could occur on a de-energized circuit in a PSPS. So if the questioner wants more detail than that, or if that's like a sufficient just kind of pass at it, that's fine, or follow up with us for if you have follow-up questions.
All right, thank you. And Rain, can you, are they able to unmute themselves in chat? It seems like they're going to have some issues on that. And
Yes, they have permission to talk and they are able to unmute themselves.
okay. Kyle, I see your hand is still raised. Can you unmute yourself and talk?
Hi there. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, very good. Apologies for the audio issues.
Bruce.
Kyle Addis from Southern California Edison. Just wanted to thank Energy Safety first off for entertaining our comments on the final draft guidelines and for hosting the meeting today. Just a few comments for the final data guidelines that we'd like to convey. First, we're just noting that pursuant to the schedule, we will be submitting data for our 2023 to 2025 WMPs in advance of the actual submission of the WMP. Pursuant to the final data guidelines, I think we are required to submit using the new template on February 1st. And so just noting that we hope to work with Energy Safety going forward on timing of the submittal of information to align quarterly information with the submission of a base and update WMP going forward. Secondly, just noting that in several of the non-spatial data tables, we see the inclusion of additional columns, particularly in table 2, that require the projection of various risk metrics, inspection findings, etc. In table 2, there are over 800 rows of data, and each of those under this template would require projections for 2023, 2024, 2025. Note this as a very significant change, and something that we have not done in the past. And so just noting that given the short turnaround time for the February 1st filing, in order to forecast these items, we're likely going to have to make some kind of macro level assumptions or simple forecast methods that are likely not going to be meaningful, and would include inherent uncertainties. And so it would be very helpful if Energy Safety had any guidance as to how they are thinking about the use of those projections at very granular levels, and for us to have the opportunity to engage with Energy Safety, across stakeholders and utilities to understand that projection data and how it can or cannot be used and the level of certainty with that data. So appreciate Energy Safety's consideration for some of those challenges in the near-term turnaround for many of those new items.
All right, thank you, Connor. I guess we have we have noted that internally, and we'll speak to our policy sign-ups. Do we have any other? Oh, I think we have some questions coming in the chat.
We do have 2 questions in the Q&A from Landy Cooey and M. Parikh.
New risk event driver, new positive.
Yeah, I could probably speak to that, Stephen.
for it, yeah.
The new risk event drivers essentially were both of those tables, 5 and 6, risk events and ignitions, were meant to essentially mirror what's being reported in the spatial data. So all that is exactly what's being reported there. So that was the thinking behind that.
Okay. Any other? Sorry. Any other questions folks might have before we get to the adoption part?
We do have one more question in the Q&A
Oh,
from M.
sorry,
Parikh.
Noe, would you like to take that one as well?
Again, it's kind of the same answer.
Okay.
Risk events were taken exactly the way they're listed in the spatial data.
All right, I'm not seeing any new questions or hands raised. Again, I will say, always encourage folks, if there's anything afterwards you think of, please reach out to us on the interesting clarity. $3.7. It's 3.7.5.6. Is that referring to spatial? Section 3 is our spatial data. So, Brian, do you have clarity on the initiative audits? If you see the question from Adam Walters. So it's the intent altogether, again, that we'll have to follow with our policy side of the house on that. Again, we're not driving in essence the reasoning for why certain metrics are being included. Our part is to just define the guidelines around how to collect and report the information and data. So we can take that question to our policy side of the house. Then Landy, secondary water data is not listed in metric table 5, though it is in spatial.
Stephen,
One of that. Yes.
this is Jenny Reed, data specialist. Landy, you'll see that we're bringing the non-spatial and spatial reporting into closer alignment. The same level of detail is not always going to be reflected. And, thank you for pointing that out. And, that's something that we'll bring back to our internal team policy and compliance.
I see Aaron's hand is raised.
Hey, Stephen.
Yeah.
Just on the, sorry, it took me a minute to find
Yeah.
what was going on in the Q&A, but I just want to point out on the other question too, there was something about new risk drivers. Changes to the options for attributing cause for existing risk drivers, the risk drivers being outages and wires down. Changes to options for pre-filling cause is not new risk drivers. That's just better resolution on things that actually cause those risk drivers. Those would have been reported items before, but before they would have been reported as other. So in other words, just trying to align our pre-selected options in the cause field that don't get recorded as other event and then need to be filled out in some free text field. That's not a change in reporting risk drivers.
Got it. So I can kind of.
And that's just my that's just my interpretation of the question, but I just want to point out that those are two I'm not saying that we may not have asked for some new risk drivers somewhere, because I'm not, again, just division of labor. I'm not personally as familiar with every nook and cranny, especially of the non-spatial data, the WMP mitigation tables, but I don't believe that we're asking for any new risk drivers in the spatial data. But we did make an effort to what I would call rationalize our options for cause for the risk drivers that we have been asking about.
Understood. Okay. So I think taking what you said and Jenny mentioned as well, as we are trying to align kind of what's being reported in both the different types of data we have, spatial, non-spatial, as well as drilling down to get a little more granularity in information we've been asking for already by offering some more options, as opposed to just having other as an option. Aaron, I see your hand is raised.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, hi. Thank you so much for taking our question. This is Erin from SDG&E. I think this is more for Brian. I think I did hear you on the line, Brian. So I know SDG&E had some back and forth just with respect to domain values. And so I just noticed in the final draft, there were quite a few changes, even from what it was before. And so I guess a couple questions on that. One is, was that intentional? So other comma, see comment now, and there's quite a few other ones where it's changing a dash to a colon or a comma. I just wanted to clarify that that was intentional. And I guess I'll just pause there.
Sure, certainly. Yeah, so we received some extensive and very helpful feedback and review from SDG&E, and I just want to, so yes, those were intentional. And so I also want to point out, I think there was some confusion on our end because the issue that was mentioned in the previous public meeting or workshop, whatever it is that we're calling these, sounded like, to me, I think I may have misunderstood, because it sounded like it was about changes in the values from one version to the next. And when I reviewed the written materials that SDG&E sent, the issue that was raised over and over again was variation. So the use of a hyphen in an other C comment value in one field and probably an M dash or some other dash in a different one, issues of varying capitalization. And so what I said on the previous meeting was, I try very hard not to change those from version to version to standardize, because I understand that causes someone to have to go change something. So while we would ultimately like them to all be the same, I have tried to avoid making those kinds of changes. But when I saw the extensive comments from SDG&E about variation in these things, we chose to go through in response to that and remove any occurrence of space dash space in those pre-selected domain values that we could, because that seems to be the thing that's causing problems. Microsoft products really like to do a lot of automatic formatting thing, especially with dashes. Ultimately, I would prefer to remove dashes at all, because it is kind of an ambiguous character, but we have some number ranges in some of those fields. And so the compromise that we settled on was getting rid of any use of a dash where it's just punctuation between words. And basically, like I said, we should have removed all occurrences of space dash space now, and we should have standardized all of the capitalization to be sentence style, not title case, except for proper names. And so that, you're correct, that involved a lot of very small changes. I didn't even count them when I was doing them, but it was reviewing a lot of places and trying to standardize that. And what I did choose was semicolon. For the other C comment and the multiple C comment and things like that, I felt like that was reasonable. I think there were some other things along with that. There were some typos and things that were caught that we corrected. The thing that you just mentioned was the big one, but I gathered that there was a second part of that question, so I'll turn it back over to you.
I just wanted to clarify that. And so just that, I think one ask would be to just minimize going forward. It is a small change, just meaning, it's just a text, but as we automate, and specifically around the initiatives, we're talking, we have 40 programs within each of that, within that bucket. So that's, when we automate 40 different programs, that's 40 different places times however many textual changes, right? So we just want, I guess, just consideration around that. Manual, it may not be such a big deal, but as you automate, it definitely poses some more, changes and work and efforts in areas that are questionable as to how much value it may add. So thank you for clarifying that, Brian. And the next thing is there was just a couple more discrepancies in terms of the last version. So one example is program name has been moved from all grid hardening. I think it was grid hardening, but it wasn't removed from an veg management project, but it was kept in for initiatives, inspection. So in veg inspection and asset inspection, they kept program name in. And so I'm not sure if that was intentional or not. And the last one was other initiative doesn't seem to align with the other grid hardening and asset inspection changes in terms of the WMP category field. So I just wanted to confirm that before we get that final database.
Sure. And the first of those two was pretty much what was asked earlier. I still never did find my exact notes on that, but what I'll say is the program name field, where it's present or not, should align with the new WMP technical guidelines. If you look at where that same piece of information is required to be reported in the WMP. That was our target, was just to align with that. And I worked with policy on that. And again, I'm not immediately remembering all the details of their reasons for including it or not including it in the tables that have to be in the WMP text. And so I'd probably be putting myself at jeopardy of saying something even more confusing if I try to relay that. But ultimately, it should align with what's required to be reported in text in the WMP.
Okay, and then if you wanted to
and-
take a look at that other initiative, we don't have to go into depth, but just if you take a look to see that alignment with the other initiative feature classes.
I will check on that on the other
Okay,
initiatives.
awesome. Thank you so much.
All right,
Hi,
do we have,
Can I just take
Yeah.
Landy's question really quick?
Yeah.
Jenny Reed, data specialist with energy safety. Landy, table 5, it includes a metric type for dig-ins, which points to underground line locations. So I would just say that the answer would be no. That there is reporting already included for underground lines on the table, and if there's any further clarification needed, we'll follow up with the department.
all right. Thank you. Thank you all for the questions and comments. Not seeing anything new, so we'll move on to the adoption and close process. So again, just want to kind of say in general as we wrap up here. Again, this is an evolution for us, as you guys have noticed over the few years we've been doing this. This is very much work in progress. One we've been working with you all on. And we're very much appreciative of your patience and understanding, and it's something we definitely appreciate everybody's feedback, comments, suggestions you have. It just makes us a better product. So again, as I say, keep coming in with any suggestions you may have. We're always here to reach out to, and we can either address them or find the proper people to relay any issues or questions you have on about the data. I just want to say we definitely value the work that we've been able to do with you all. So with that, we'll move this portion of the public meeting to where we consider adoption of the data guidelines pursuant to Government Code Section 15475.6. In summary, that Government Code states that the Office of Energy Infrastructure Safety must adopt guidelines set forth requirements, formatting, timing, and any other matters required to exercise its powers, performance duties, and meet its responsibilities. So, in kind of pursuant to Government Code Section 154.7.6, and the authority kind of delegated to me by our Deputy Director, Energy Safety hereby adopts these data guidelines effective today, December 14th, 2022. And we will issue the final guidelines by close of business tomorrow, December 15th, 2022, and place these in our e-filing system, as well as links on our website. So with that, just want to again thank you all for participating. Thank you all for your comments. And again, just thank you. And we'll adjourn this and have a good rest of your day.